Revived Thoughts is a production of Revived Studios.
This is Troy and Joel, and you are listening to Revived Thoughts Conversation. Revived Thoughts Conversation. Normally, every episode, we would bring you a different voice from history and a sermon that they delivered. But on these conversational episodes, we actually try to do the opposite, where with the normal episode, we really dig into a certain person's story and a certain sermon and just a certain moment in the story of church history. With the conversations, we're kind of taking a much more broad, big picture outlook, taking the things that we've learned throughout doing these episodes and telling all these stories and trying to kind of apply them to a topic or an idea today.
Yeah, it's a conversation. It's a conversation based on stuff we've learned from Revived Thoughts. Yeah. And it's delightful. They're always fun. They're some of my favorite episodes to do.
They are.
And it just kind of...
And usually every year we have somebody say like, oh man, that conversation was my favorite episode you did this year too.
Yeah, it's kind of hard not to. Again, we didn't have this as part of the original format of how we thought about doing this show, but you think about so much stuff while recording these episodes and while doing research that you can't help but like want to talk about it. And then one day Troy and I were just like, what if we just record us talking about this type of stuff? And then bam, the Revived Conversation episode version edition variation was born.
Yeah, it was born. I like the way you said that. It sounds like we were like one day like we should have a podcast while making our podcast is kind of almost the vibe that happened there.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited about today's topic.
I am too. I actually have notes. I thought about this, and I want to run them by you. I was actually thinking I could present my ideas and then get your thoughts on them.
A huge fan, Joel. Take the reins. Honestly, the only reason this one came to me, I think I was the one that pitched this one.
Yeah.
And the main reason was over the summer when I was traveling, there was just like a lot of moments where I was like, this is something that we do today. That there are just so many things that it would never work this way like 200 years ago. This is so specific to the way we do things now. So that made me that's kind of where the idea was like, we always talking about how different it was back then, but how much, if we time traveled some of these pastors to today, what would be the things they would go, wow, you guys do it different now. Like, we would never have done it that way before. So that was kind of where my mind went to.
Yeah. And kind of vice versa. I feel like you also have the same application of like, we have those realizations of, wow, they did this very different back then than we do this today. Is that good? Is that bad? Yeah. That's for us to talk about in this conversation.
We're going to find out in a minute. And by the way, Joel, one last thing we had to say about the conversations too. Sometimes we debate. Sometimes the topics get argumentative. Joel and I do not pre-script anything that's happening. I remember a guy told me like, so how much of the conversation part, like the episode, I'm like, well, we have like we write down what we're going to say about these guys because their names and dates and stuff are not always easy to remember. And he was like, yeah, but the conversation, I was like, oh no, that's completely unscripted. So if we end up arguing, we're actually arguing.
Yeah, although I don't think we'll argue much in this episode. I think we're pretty similarly minded.
I came in to fight. No, yeah, we probably will.
This isn't about any church conferences or anything like that, so it should be pretty mellow. Okay, so we're juxtaposing. We're comparing how pastors operate in the 21st century compared to how they operated in years of old. So I kind of broke this into categories in my head. So there's categories in the pro column, as in like, these are things we do different, but they're kind of nice. Yeah. Yeah. And then there's obviously the other end of that. Here's things that they did back then that are kind of nice, and I feel like we're missing out on. So I need a point, Troy. Feel free to jump in, add your own, excuse me, or to push back or clarify on. But the first one that I have written down
Let's
here.
Hear it.
Access to resources. So this is, again, in favor of our current era that we live in. Man, talk about the internet. Talk about unlimited libraries. You go back 200-300 years, books are super expensive. They're hard to get your hands on. And now we have all the commentaries. We have all the different resources. Even think about just like online seminary training, like you can get very thorough, biblically sound training
At the tip of your
remotely,
fingers.
at the
Truly.
tip of your fingers. Yeah.
To add on to what you're saying, there are several seminaries that have just put their entire class online. So even if you don't go online for your degree, which you can do from anywhere in the world, pretty much at any seminary now, you could theoretically learn all the information these guys are learning, even if you didn't take the class. I mean, that's wild to me. That what information is able to be accessed like never before.
Right. No, it's incredible. It's wonderful. Along those same lines is just technology and how it makes things available. I think of like Bible softwares, like your logos or your accordance.
Okay, logos is a bit pricey. All right, logos. If you're listening and you're thinking, like if I'm gonna, somebody. So it's not logos. I'm pretty sure it's logos. But they have a bunch of sermons that are like old sermons that I've tried to find and get through because it's pricey. I don't want to put that money in, and I'm not sure if they'd give them to me anyway. I don't know if there's a copyright on them. So there's a little beef there with me. I'm like, if we have somebody listening who works for them, okay, give me a free key. Let me in there and let me play around. Give me some of those sermons, and then this will become much more of an endorsable thing. But just in my experience, I saw that it's kind of pricey. That one is because so many other accessible resources are free. It makes them stand out. I'm sure it's amazing. I'm sure if I was a pastor, I probably would want to have it. But yeah.
Gotcha. But even just like word processors, like back then, these people, listeners who are listening to us that preach sermons or lead devotions or something like that. Imagine literally handwriting. I guess there are some people that actually do handwrite their outlines out and things like that. But they would write their sermons out in their entirety. Yeah. Like these were transcripts. That's how we have them today. That's how we can read them on Revived Thoughts, is because that was like how people did it back then. My handwriting, man, imagine the hand cramps you'd have to get. You'd have to get some pretty strong ink and
some
quill,
of these guys
muscle
went on a while. So I mean, these 80-page, 120-page Puritan sermons, somebody's writing that down either as they go or afterwards. It's pretty wild how long those things were. I'm guessing it's the pastor. I'm guessing he just tried to recite it from memory or something, but that's not an easy task at all. Some of them, of course, would manuscript it out, but then that means you have 120 pages in front of you. Now, what the average person has, maybe a tablet or something, is swing through it. It's easy. It can be recorded. It's definitely just so much simpler than it was back then.
Yeah, I am very thankful for my computer for whipping up outlines with, and then my iPad for taking with me up to the pulpit to reference everything.
Even this show right here that we have right now, Revived Thoughts would not exist except for in this technological moment. I can find sermons that have never been recorded for all around the world, from libraries in Australia to the number of places we've gotten just access to for free, easy. Almost, we rarely pay for one. And then we've gotten people from all over the world, from New Zealand, Australia, Europe, like just all over. They're reading these sermons for us. And you and I are right now able to do this while you're in one continent and I'm in another continent talking to each other. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Like, try to explain that to somebody 100 years ago, and they would think this is witchcraft. Like, they would be like, that is magic for sure.
Yeah. Okay, all right, so the next one I got for you, listen to this one here.
Wait, can I throw a counter to that? I want to throw a negative on that last one.
Okay.
Because, yes, so the positive, access to information, you have the ability to reach out and get resources like never before. But the counter negative is the false teaching and bad ideas have the ability to get out there like never before as well. I have students who have come to me, and basically they're showing me TikToks and Instagram Reels and things like that are just absolutely, they're so nonsensical. 100 years ago, that would have never made print. Like, nobody would have ever been like, oh, the Bible's not true because of X, Y, and Z. But not only do they have these, showing up in their feed, and now we have to work to correct these silly ideas because anybody can turn a TikTok on, but they're actually targeting them. Like, they've been found that there are, atheists and Muslims are intentionally targeting, young people, for example, with these kind of apologetic style videos to hammer against the faith. I've had students who've kind of been in, you can tell, like, their feed is in one of those campaigns. And so that's the other side of it, is like, we have more access to information than ever before, but also false information, I feel like, has more access to us than never before.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's a good point. Yeah. Pros and cons. The pros and cons.
Pros and
of
cons.
everything.
I just think it's an interesting one that we don't think about. Like, I mean, how many? You try again. Go back to 100 years ago. Try to explain to somebody like, yeah, you're going to have a device, and there will be people who are against your faith that are just going to be sending you messages and videos into that device, like questioning your faith 24/7. And it's like, and they're going to have like, it's going to be streamed into your algorithm because of the maybe the money they paid or whatever it is to make sure that you're getting hit with that. And I'm like, that's a crazy thing that we're dealing with. That people 100 years ago, maybe even people 10 years ago would have looked at that and been like, what's happening?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why this next one I think is not so controversial, and this is kind of a boring one. It's more logistical in my mind, but amplification and broadcast, right? We have microphones. We have it set up in such a way where everyone can hear. You know, think about your Whitfields and your Wesleys that had to project to thousands of people without amplification. They're just up there shouting their sermons or something, you know, like
that's the weird part is Spurgeon was said that he was like famous for his ability to whisper and somehow everyone could hear him. And I
guess people just got real quiet.
Or was it did he have a way of whispering that like could echo? I don't know. Like I want to know what the whispers sounded like.
Yeah, that'd be incredible. So, and then again, I mean, after with the microphone comes the ability to record that microphone. So we have live streaming, we have podcasts. If you're subscribed to Revived Thoughts, you're almost certainly subscribed to some sermon, you know, church's feed that, you know, whether it's your church or some church that you like, you're probably listening to other sermons, all made possible due to technology in the 21st century and some microphones that change how we consume sermons. And the accessibility of them. Yeah.
And also, this creates this weird thing, too, where it is not uncommon, especially for the maybe more popular pastors, that it sounds weird, but I feel like I have listened to pastors who aren't even speaking to the people in front of them. Like, they're almost preaching for the sound bites, for the people that are going to be listening to that on the commute ride home.
That's so true.
It's such a weird thing, but you can tell, like, they're not... The people in front of them are not who this. It's just a platform to reach the people out there, and that's certainly something that is. I'm sure that probably is on some level been around since maybe the radio even days, but like that's definitely not something that would have been around 200 years ago.
Definitely. Yeah, it's interesting. Just the notion, the idea that what I'm saying is going to be heard by more people and more clearly. It changes how people approach and think about how they're going to say what they're going to say. I don't know. I mean, it not necessarily that it should. It's just like that's kind of the byproduct that we see over time is that just the existence of the idea that someone could take a soundbite from that is gonna change how people present things.
Well, let me take a small example. When we first started Revived Thoughts, you and I, we were dealing with some of these pastors either owned slaves or were like a part of the South, or these pastors, wouldn't have the best reputations on whatever. That's just a big dramatic issue. But there's all these big issues, and we're taking people who, they may have done they did some great things for the kingdom, but they had, flaws in their reputation as well. And I remember you and I were very nervous in those early days of like, how will people hear these things, and will they try to come after us and cancel us? And if you listen to some of our early episodes, I've heard people say like, we sound much more nervous and much more, and we were just nervous with the whole idea. Would anybody even buy into Revived Thoughts? But there was also just this idea like, oh, people are waiting to cancel you. And then as we've gone on, I realized most people aren't sitting around waiting to cancel people. And now when I talk to people and they're doing stuff like, oh, what if they get mad about that? I'm like, trust me, the offense people are not nearly as plentiful out here in the Christian world as we think they are. But even, I don't think you and I are the only ones. I don't think we're the first people, because I've heard lots of other podcasters say that kind of thing. We're like, oh, we're going to get the angry emails, or oh, we're going to get canceled, or they're going to come after us for saying that. But just this idea that like, people are just wary of this online out there, thing that can cancel you if a soundbite goes wrong. How much does that affect pastors and sermons and online ministries and stuff? And how much is that just, again, how do you explain that to people 200 years ago? Where like, yeah, the people in your congregation will be edified by what you're saying, but you might be afraid that people you'll never meet who aren't Christians might come after you for a statement you make. And it's like, wait, that's something people are going to be afraid of? Yeah.
Yeah, I have more thoughts about that in our cons column. In our,
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in
no,
early.
you're good. But like that does nest nicely with one of the things I had written down here. Okay, so the last thing. These are actually, now that I'm thinking about it, pretty lame prose. Now that I'm seeing it, but I do think this is a pro. Comfort and logistics. Okay, we have air-conditioned buildings. We have heated buildings. We got nice padding on our
Excuse me,
seatings.
speak for yourself.
That's true.
Okay?
Yeah, you're on
maybe
your own
not
out there.
all of us have all these things.
And Indo with your humid hot climate. At least in America here, we got climate-controlled buildings. Again, decent seating most of the time. Good
Must be
lighting.
nice.
Clear sound, unless I'm running the soundboard. Then there's probably feedback. But most of the time. Pastors have like their own office, which is it sounds like a no-brainer, but that was not historically the case for a lot of history. Secretaries, like that's a huge luxury. So all of those things, in theory, make it a more enjoyable experience to be fed from the pastor.
I agree. I would say some other, comforts. You have a car to get to the church in the morning, probably, or maybe a motorcycle, depending on where you are. But you have most people have a transportational means to get to.
If it's raining outside, you don't have to stay home because the horse is going to struggle in the mud. There
you go. Or it's going to be kids get on your whatever. Yeah, you don't have to worry about just so many there's little things like that. You have. Probably have a PowerPoint projector of some kind for imagery. I mean, there's just so much things you can do that the people of the past would have absolutely envied those kinds of activity. And of course, they didn't know any better, right? Like, I'm sure 100 years from now, if we're all still here, the floating cars will make it a lot easier to get to church. And they'll be like, back in the day, you had to drive on the ground. Okay, sure. The point being, though, like, there's just so many things like that. You can have access to resources, access to ideas. You can have convenience. If you want to take a trip around the world and do some ministry somewhere else, that's a plane flight that takes, tops 24 to 36 hours, not a 4-month boat journey like Hudson Taylor would have been going on. And even that would have been considered fast compared to 100 years before that. You know what I mean? Like you're not worried that you're going to catch, some kind of horrible mosquito-borne illness and probably die on the way as well. Like, you still can get those mosquito-borne illnesses, but you probably will get cured of them as you go. Like, that's a lot more convenient, certainly, than it used to be. And so that's just cool. Even just getting in contact with people, you can send an email and you don't have to wait for the post office
to
carry that letter and hope they don't lose it. And I'm saying, like, that's really nice. I mean, over the summer when we're traveling, a lot of the churches that reach out to us, talk to us, and we engage with are coming in through emails. And, we have people who listen to our show who we went to a church of someone who listened to our show. We only knew them through the show and they were able to get to us. They listened to our online podcast and then we received an email from them and off we were, to a video call and all that. I mean, that's only made possible by this convenient world we live in, and it just wouldn't have been able to happen. And then I could drive down to his church, preach there, and get back all in only a couple hours, things that to people a long time ago, that would have been days of travel, and they would have been like, that's a lot for one church. You know what I mean? Like, it's amazing. It's easy to forget how convenient our life really is.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I want to shift gears. Unless you have anything more.
I had a few more pros we could put in here.
Why is the 21st century the best century of all time?
So a big pro, man, if you're eschatologically right now, if you're a post-mill, you're nodding your head like, good, this is a good episode, guys. Good job. But anyway, so yeah, another one. Pastors, I think, and I there have been seasons of this, cycles of this, where this is a thing. And I think right now we are in a cycle where pastors understand very well, and anyone in ministry, I think, that they need to take care of their family and they need to take care of their kids. And that has not always been a thing. It used to be not even all that long ago. Not all that long ago, missionaries basically sacrificed their children out on the front lines. They would put them in dorm in international schools, and they still sometimes have to. I understand there's reasons. But it used to be kind of almost like a lot of even older people I meet out here and there, and will say things like, our organization would just kind of shove the kids off. And that, I don't know any organizations that are thinking that way anymore. It seems like most of them have realized, like, whoa, we can't ask our guys to sacrifice their families and sacrifice their marriages. And the same thing with pastors. Like there's so many more books written on, how can you balance being a good father and doing ministry compared to like 40 years ago. I think that is a much more understood subject. And it's not to say that all pastors of the past were bad dads. Charles Spurgeon, we go to him a lot. He's famously a very good father. So that there have been seasons, but there have also been seasons where I can name some names where these guys were not good dads. They were traveling and doing stuff, and if their kids were saved, it seemed like it was saved in spite of them, not necessarily because of them. And so we live in an era where like it is acknowledged and understood that the pastor needs to have time to take care of his family, take care of his kids, take care of his wife, and not just be overwhelmed and completely burnt out by the ministry that they're in.
That's a great point. I think that's actually probably the best one. The best progress that we've made. Yeah, best pro we've had so far. Because you're totally right. I do feel, unfortunately, probably the majority of these people that we talk about don't have great family relationships because they are all in on ministry. And they were very effective and did some great things because of that, but their family suffered because of it. And that is not really a mindset that is around these days. And I think for the family ministry balance approach is something that we value and prioritize a lot more today than we did. Yeah, like you said, even like 40 years ago. I mean, I listened to stories that my grandparents would tell, and even back in the 50s or 60s, it still sounded like ministry came first. Yeah, and obviously God comes first, and then family. But I think the listeners know what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's going to be seasons, obviously. You're heading to a family dinner date with the family, and then your parishioner calls and their husband died. You can't be like, sorry, family dinner date, family comes first. There's gonna be moments where the emergency may overrule the normal things, but there's still gonna be, the family is still prioritized. I think in a way that it just doesn't sound like it was. Even I hear stories that are just not that old, and you're like, I cannot believe that used to be a thing that everybody was experiencing and was supposed to be okay with. It's wild how much we neglected that aspect of pastoral care. And I hear it all the time now from people. I think you probably heard it too. If you fail your family, if you weren't there, not that your kids still might walk away from God, but if you failed to disciple them, love them, teach them the word, you didn't even make time for them, then then your other ministries, in a sense, almost don't even count. Like you failed overall what you were sent by God to do, and that I think is something that we needed to hear. So that's a big pro that I think is alive today that we don't see historically. Again, and there are cycles, there are moments. Like I can point to good pastors who were good dads. So it's not trying to slam and shade all of them, but there were definitely seasons where these evangelists are traveling 19 months out of the year, and you could just tell, like, when did they ever see their family? When did they ever see their kids? That we love our David Livingstons who cross Africa and bring the gospel to Africa, but we feel bad for their children who, never really saw dad because he was always in the middle of Africa somewhere. How would you have even done that life? I don't know. I'm not here to judge them. I'm just saying I appreciate the moment we live in now where we're not doing that. So that's a big one. It was a big pro I wanted to make sure we got out there. I'm trying to think of some other pros, but maybe I'm blanking. Maybe it will come to me with the cons. So let's start doing some of these negatives, and then like I thought of negatives as we went with pros, maybe I'll start thinking of some pros as we go through the negatives.
And a lot of these do go hand in hand with what we have been talking about, just on the other side. And we say cons, but really they're not. They're pros for the old ways. Like they're both pros. We got pros for current days, and we got pros for the old ways. I think that's
the traditional approach. Pros. Maybe that's a good way to look at it. We're just positiving the old fashioned.
Yeah. Okay. So this one I have here,
suits in church. That's the first one you're gonna say.
We got to bring them back. Ties.
I mean, you go to a pretty old Baptist church, so you actually guys are still dressed pretty nice over there.
I don't know. I mean, yes, we are dressed more nice than the average person, but I could probably count on one hand the amount of people that actually wear suits to church nowadays. I'm more of a polo and khaki type of churchgoer guy, and that's dressed up for a lot of folks. So.
That is dressed up. That was dressed up for the churches. It's still dressed up actually for the churches. I almost always, I hope we're not offended. And somebody's gonna be like, they don't wear suits. No, but I mean, like I almost always wear a polo, but it might be jeans or something else beyond that.
Blasphemy. Okay. scriptural saturation. Okay, we talked about there being an abundance of resources and tools and how that's wonderful today. But, back then, due to a lack of those abundance of resources, your Bible was your resource, right? Like that's what you had to study and to build sermons on. And so you are memorizing scripture. You are relying deeply on that familiarity with the Bible itself. And so sermons back then, and we see this in all the sermons that we put out here, heavily expositional, heavily doctrinal, and certainly more so than how sermons are usually structured in today's age, for better or for worse. Again, you can never have too much Bible, I think, but that's definitely a difference, and I think it's because that's the source material you had to work with.
It's interesting. I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's so interesting the way you say that, because it is very true of this time we're living in, where we are both scripturally saturated and at the same time we're to be honest, compared to the past, we're kind of biblically illiterate. We don't expect a pastor to just name drop a little line from 2 Kings and he assumed that his audience totally understood where he was coming from anymore. We expect the pastor to, at least what I've seen, we usually expect the pastor to kind of keep it shallow and explain every single piece of everything so that nobody gets lost, because we need to be, and we've had people, and I want anyone to listen to Revived Thoughts and listen as much as they can, but there are many people who listen to our show and they're like, man, I have a hard time with some of those old sermons because they do go so deep, and I find that I'm getting submerged underwater, and I'm not used to, your show, your sermons are the only thing like this in my life. But really, what we pick out of history is not we're not picking, we are trying to pick the best, but we're not picking anything unusual. We're not just only give me the deepest ones. It just was that most of the sermons throughout history tended to be deeper, and it's kind of a sad sign that our attention spans and our ability to go deep and to think these connections through has gone away from people who are in a lot of places preaching to almost peasants. You know what I mean? They weren't always preaching at Oxford or at Cambridge. But at the same time, there's a spiritual saturation where, people have apps and stuff on their phone, and everywhere they go, where there's little things that are shooting verses at them. But it's they've become numb to it. It's almost like, if I can draw a parallel to food, it's almost like because they're fat on fast food, it has crushed their ability to eat good food and understand the difference in a well-nutritioned meal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like it. That is a weird, and I'm not sure completely accurate illustration, but it totally resonates. I totally click with it.
Okay, give me your next. Let's hit that next comment. Okay. We nailed that. I don't feel like we can go any deeper than that.
No more notes on that.
Scripture today is like Sonic fast food. No questions asked.
Make a T-shirt. Let's go. Okay, so this one, I feel like this might be a little bit of a stretch, but I like the notion of it, or I feel like there's something there to the premise of it, and this idea of endurance and sacrifice. We talked about, how easy it is to commute and to get up in an air-conditioned church to present and stuff. Everything was just a little harder back then, right? And especially, again, we look at our people like a Wesley or a Whitfield that are preaching multiple times a day, traveling on horseback between cities. They are long, hard days, and you're enduring hardships along the way, all different types of poverty or persecution for the gospel's sake. And so I do think there is something from a communal approach, right? Like the group of people, when you have a pastor who is doing hard things in order to do what he is called to do, when him getting up there in the pulpit, it is difficult for him to do that, and he's pushing through that difficultness, that kind of gives some type of more legitimacy to his authority. That might be a little bit, as far as there's I feel like a camaraderie there with a congregation where, and again, I know it's a little bit of reach, but it's something that I feel like is dulled a bit by the comforts that we have here, where if everything's just comfortable, then it's not really hard, or you're not really giving up anything or sacrificing anything.
There's a sacrifice. Let me kind of add to that. I do agree with you. And look, there have always been false teachers. There have always been the people who are just doing it because it's their job. And we have plenty of stories of that. So we know that's always been a thing. Even in the days when it was hard, the fake pastor who's a Unitarian or whatever is going to still get up in the snowstorm sometimes. Sure. With that said, though, I do agree with you. I think in my own personal life, when we were working in Cambodia, I had to preach almost a lot of the sermons there because I was one of the only people who had any background in Bible, who knew how to do any of it. And I didn't have a projector. Was just me on stage speaking to people who English was definitely their second language. And a lot of them knew English very well, but a lot of them didn't. And preaching in that position was very challenging for me because it was, and I'll be honest, some of the crowd was a little hostile at different times. But yeah, I also think that was one of like the best training fields I could have possibly had for giving sermons and pastoring, because you can kind of learn. It's difficult, and I'm the only reason. If I don't speak well, if I don't give the points directly, if I'm not clear in my language, they're not going to get it. There's no slideshow. There's nothing else. It's just me and them. They're on plastic chairs. It's hot. Let's go. And sometimes a monkey would show up and distract everybody. But you know what I'm saying? There's something that I do agree with you. I think you learn stuff from those kinds of situations. I think of the modern day equivalent is so many pastors get their start somewhere like in youth ministry or something like that. And I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like sometimes you might think, I went to Bible college and seminary, hand me the pulpit of the great church. And we know a lot of pastors who did that throughout history. But a lot of times, no. A lot of times you're humbled and you get sent to to take care of the retirement community, or you get sent to take care of the youth ministry, or you get sent to those kinds of places. And I think it's actually a good place for you to learn and grow in those harder ministries before you finally are given that pastoral role, the big pulpit, the big place, because I think God grows you in those much more challenging environments. And today, a challenging environment is getting in a car, going to an air-conditioned spot, speaking with a microphone that everyone can hear you. You know what I mean? Like, our challenging is just very different. Another example that kind of aligns with that a little bit is the whole community aspect of it, too. We had some friends from the Netherlands, and they kind of lived outside of Amsterdam, kind of like in the countryside, where it was still very the old church way of doing things. And they would say, they said that one of the things that was very strange for them to get used to was that their American friends, after service was over, they would want to go to lunch and stuff. And they were like, we never went to lunch after a service because nothing was open. Like, the whole community closed down for services on Sunday, and you went home and did family devotions or something like that. Like, that was just how it rolled. And I don't know that I want Chili's to close on Sundays, but it is kind of cool that this idea of you and the pastor, the whole community, like you said, are sacrificing and coming together to make church a priority. And it's something we're all going to feel. Even if the people who don't go to church, their day is going to be changed because of the people who are living for Christ. And it's not the same. There's that impact and that communal kind of response is not happening in that way at all in most of the West today.
Mm-hmm. This one is kind of a no-brainer, pretty obvious, but people back then just had longer attention spans, And
we kind of talked to that, yep.
Yeah. Here in Revived Thoughts, we try to put an effort into making sure sermons are probably an hour max. Kind of for that reason. It's really, but
yeah.
And sometimes we just have a fragment, or sometimes it was legitimately a 10-minute sermon delivery, but it is very common for sermons to be 2 hours of delivery, and yep. It's just very foreign for our brains to wrap our heads around. Yep. Would we be better off if we could listen to a 2-hour sermon? I don't know. That still sounds like a lot.
So, for example, there's a guy whose name is John Fox. He's famous for Fox's Book of Martyrs. I would love to do an episode on him. The only sermons I have found on him are legitimately, if I took them, and I mean, they are 240 pages, which would be the equivalent of 6 to 7 hours of sermon. And I'm like, that is insane. What on earth? Was he actually talking for 6 hours? And I have heard that there were some churches, I haven't done the research to be able to conclude this, but I know that there were some churches, it seems, that they would basically turn it into an all-day affair. Like the pastor would kind of give part of a sermon, then there'd be like a Q&A, then they'd go to lunch, then they'd come back, the pastor might give the next part of the sermon. And in that situation, you could really see how that could become 3 to 4 hours, and that's what's happening there. So I'm not sure if that's what was going on with John Fox, but then I have a friend from Brazil, and he told me, like, yeah, church is usually like an hour and a half of me preaching, maybe 2 hours sometimes. And I'm like, wow. So it is, us, we seem to have gotten our attention spans shorter, and we don't view church that way. But to be fair, it's also a long time coming. George Whitefield once famously said, if your sermon's longer than 25 minutes, either you better be an angel or your audience better be angels, because that's all you got, basically. The last part was me adding on, but that's it. You don't, 25 minutes is enough. After that, you're losing people, or they're losing you, and it's not going to go well. And I don't know, that seems a little short. And I've also put some George Whitefield sermons out. They're not 25 minutes long from what I can tell. But his main point is, hey, even back then, that you need to keep it shorter than maybe 3 hours. But it is true. We have shorter attention spans. And you know how I know, or maybe it's just me, maybe you're listening and you're going, no, I'm able to sit perfectly still, but I get tempted to look at my phone while I'm in church sometimes. I want to check messages. I want to know what's going on. And that's not nice. And as someone who's preached, I look out, I see people, they're on their phones. Sure, some of them are on their Bible apps, but they're not, because they're also messaging. And so you're preaching to people not only who have a shorter attention span, but even while they're in church, they might be distracted by something and completely somewhere else because someone sent them a funny message, or they're making plans for later that day. And so, that's something I don't think in the 1700s here in the Great Awakening, Jonathan Edwards and them were having to be like, hey, put your phones away, right? Like, I'm pretty sure that wasn't happening.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay, so this one is actually, I think, the main one, and that I recognize in my head as far as when I compare sermons today to back then. What I've summarized here as evangelistic urgency. Okay.
Yeah.
Back then.
Wow. I just want to say, good one. That's a great one.
Right. There was this raw urgency aimed at stirring repentance in the communities there. Today, sermons are much more focused on encouragement or practical application or topical issues, which again can all be very good things, and people relate with them and talk with them. But I do think we've lost a little bit of that edge of the proclamation of the gospel. People do not preach with that same evangelistic urgency today that we did back then. And it just seems to be a cultural thing. Like, society doesn't want to. And it's kind of sad.
Yeah. It's sad. And I do hope it's changing. I think for whatever reason, and if I could pinpoint it, it seems to be about 30 years ago or so, a lot of churches got it in their head that if you want people to come to the doors, come sit in the pews, you need to preach nicely. You need to be, don't be preaching hellfire. Don't be preaching afterlife. Even the word sin, some churches are scared to use it, And if you preach nice enough, if you create good stories, if you have enough anecdotes, if you put enough jokes. I had a person message the show one time and basically tell us, like, I'm in seminary and I'm being told I don't put enough jokes in my sermons. Are jokes like a biblical church history thing? And I was like, not really. I haven't noticed that many jokes in the sermons of the past. But this guy was told, like, I'm not putting enough jokes in my sermons. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you do enough of these things and you friendly it all out and flesh it all out, they'll come to church, they'll listen, they'll enjoy it, and they'll keep coming, and eventually they'll get saved and their life will be changed. And I'm not saying that didn't happen. Let me give as much credit as possible to those people. Maybe there was a unique moment in history 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that perhaps that worked in. I don't think we're living in that moment anymore, if it was there. And I kind of wonder if that moment ever truly existed, considering when I look at the great sermons of history, one thing I do see kind of repeating throughout is, I'm worried the people in my congregation are going to go to hell, so I'm going to preach them the gospel of Jesus Christ so they don't. Mm-hmm. And the great sermons, maybe there were a lot of other wishy-washy sermons throughout history. I mean, a lot of our pastors we feature are kind of saying, like, hey, those other guys are but we're going to tell the truth here. So maybe they were. But the sermons that last, the sermons that matter, the pastors that we know the names of today, the famous ones that made a difference, They're preaching Christ crucified. They're preaching hell is real. And they're preaching sin needs to be atoned for and can only be atoned for through the gospel. And I don't, it's true. When I go to churches and when I hear people speak, I see just a reluctance to just go there. I see a lot of how can we help these people feel better? They need some hope and encouragement. They do. The most encouraging thing you can tell them is their sins have been atoned for by Jesus. And then it's this odd thing too, where in my experience, I try to preach a little deep. I try to go into the weeds. I try to go to details. I love details and Bible stories. And I have a lot of people come up to me and go, wow, that was really great. I really enjoyed that. I love the way you put it. And I'm not saying like, oh, I'm just an amazing person. Not at all. But what I'm more just trying to say is like, people, I think, want that deeper stuff. People listen to our sermons and they go, wow, like I've never heard preaching and teaching just throwing it all out there the way it is, like actually just preaching it the way it feels like it's supposed to be. Can you really imagine Paul the apostle or Peter the apostle getting up and just kind of, just keeping it chill and not mentioning Jesus's cross right on the money and not mentioning hell and heaven? And that's not to say if your sermon doesn't include those two things in it every time it's failed, but do they? Another good example is I had some students, we were talking about, they had asked me some things they had seen on TikTok, online stuff about the end times. And I asked a couple classes and stuff I was teaching, I was like, do you ever hear churches talking about the end times? And almost none of them put their hands up. And I don't think that's uncommon. I don't think that the end times are being preached anymore. But what's really interesting is online, it's a huge thing. Like the secular world is talking about things. Like there are so many people talking about the end times online. And I can look at church history and find so many sermons about like, hey, you're going to be judged someday. This world's coming to an end, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying? Like it was definitely a topic throughout history. And nowadays it seems to be a topic that most of the church avoids. They're just scared of these deep controversial topics. And I just can't help but think that needs to come to an end.
All right. So that's actually pretty much all I got. George, do you have anything else you would like to add? This has been a delightful conversation.
Yeah. Some other cons is I don't think we've ever been, I kind of mentioned it when I was talking about sermon, like, having your phone out during a service stuff, but I don't think we've ever been more easily distractible. And you might say like, that sounds kind of like what we just said, but here it's a little bit more, how do I say this? The attention span doesn't just go with the sermon. It also goes with afterwards. Like in the old days, you go to church, you get the whole family out, you're all in suits or dresses, you go, you ride the wagon up the hill, you get there, 2 hours of preaching and teaching, you're singing together, it's great, you go home, and what else do you have to do, right? Maybe read some books, do some farm stuff, but I mean, like, you're still probably thinking a lot about what you did in church and who you talked to, and it's going to be a topic that probably sits with you throughout that week even. Not so much today, right? By the time you get home, you might have already turned on a podcast on the way home that's completely different from what you were learning. Hopefully it's this podcast, but whatever it is, you've already moved on. You get home, you flip on, there's 1,000 different entertainment channels. Maybe your family is going to throw on a Netflix or whatever it is. Maybe they're just going to hop on the news. You've been getting alerts all day. Oh, there's this big story. Everyone's talking about it. And you see what I'm saying though? Like, it's not just that we have short attention spans. There's so many stuff and before you know it, by Sunday night, is anybody still talking or thinking about the sermon from Sunday morning, right? Like it's already, whoosh, it's out of our system just that fast because we live in such a fast-paced world that I don't think it was quite the same for people back in the day. I think what was preached on Sunday, just because there wasn't as much to compete with, I think it was still on their minds on Monday. And I don't know. I think a lot of times we have already flushed it out of our system and have already moved on to the next 10 things by the time Monday is hit. And that's definitely a unique con, I think, to our current era. I just don't know. Another unique con, and this is bad, with all the access to information, pastors have the ability to cheat. Doesn't that make sense? It's bad, but you can steal a sermon online. You can have ChatGPT create a sermon. You can have... you can even maybe not steal a sermon, but you can just kind of listen to several other pastors and kind of dissect and go, I'm going to just kind of pick and pull what I like best. There's just a temptation there that pastors of the past would still have. We've covered Christmas Evans famously copied a pastor's sermon the first time he ever preached and got caught, which must have been mortifying for him. But I think God was trying to nip that in the bud early. At the same time, though, we know it's actually already a thing. It's already confirmed our pastors out there using ChatGPT and AI to help write their future sermons. And I think, call me old-fashioned, but I don't think that's the best direction for sermons to head in, to have these things written by AI. But they're coming, right? And it's just a lot of stuff like that. That is just, it is going to be a unique world we move into. And I think that's where, and maybe if I can end it, maybe this is my final thought, that's almost where I think the old-fashioned stuff is going to stand out. In a world of fast, to use that fast food candy illustration, in a world of fast food candy stuff where everything's kind of this fake, quick, nourishes you for a second but doesn't give you anything lasting, that's where the real meat, that's where real stuff, that's where the genuine articles are going to, I think, stand out so much more. And I think that people won't immediately be used to it. They might be used to the other stuff. It might make them sick at first, but they're going to crave this real, meaningful, different kind of world that if the church can offer that in the fast-paced, crazy world, on friendships and loneliness. Back in the day, people needed community so bad. You couldn't farm and make it on your own without the people around you working together, right? Like at the doctor, you had to run to town and get them. The farm catches fire, the whole neighborhood's going to we don't need anybody anymore. We can truly live almost completely isolated. My wife started seeing these ads all over social media, and I think I've interacted with other people. They're becoming common, where people are getting advertisements just for knitting groups and book groups. And you might say like, oh, well, book clubs and knitting groups have been around for a long time. Not this way. They're not getting together and knitting something together. They're not getting together and talking about a book together. They're people who they're alone and they want to read with someone else, or they're alone and they just knit in the same room as other people. These people are so lonely that they need someone to just spend time with them because they don't have anybody. And especially as the younger generations, a lot of them are kind of casting aside marriage, casting aside children, which that's its own topic. That's literally, we could do an episode on how different that is in history. As these people get older, as the loneliness of their life really starts to take effect, the church is going to stand out because the church is a place where community happens, where friendship actually can be, if the church lets it happen, can be nourished well, where people should be coming together and spending time together. And I think that's going to be a unique thing that pastors are going to be preaching to people online, even maybe, that they don't even come inside the doors of their church. And they're going to be preaching to people where these people legitimately have no one else in their life. And that is going to be something unique to this era too. So the church has some challenges that they're going to have to embrace. But I think the church has a real opportunity in front of it where these lonely people are going to be seeking community. And if the church can open their doors and find ways to bring them in, they might be able to see some real impact as the only people who care about those kinds of people. So just some other things out there that is just very unique to this moment in church history.
Definitely. Okay, I feel like that's a good place to wrap it up here. Listener, I'm sure you have been yelling at your phone saying, oh, you gotta say this. You have to include this one. Write into us. We want to hear revivedthoughts@gmail.com, revivedthoughts@gmail.com. Tell us, what do you think?
Yeah,
we do better in the 21st century than they did back in olden days, or vice versa? What did they do better back then that we suffer from the lack of today? I'm sure we've missed some good ones, so let us know right on in. Troy, do you have anything else?
I'm really curious what other people will say, because I can think of things that we didn't add on. Like there's guys who I have people I really like that they share some of our stuff. And they're pastor, like sermon reviewers. Like they go on YouTube and they review sermons. That's certainly something that you would have never seen in the past, like a Monday, like a football review thing, but for sermons and stuff. So there's so many things that are different today that the world would have never understood back then. I don't have anything else to add. I'm looking forward to your guys' comments and your guys' emails and what you think we missed. The big one, maybe there's one, like you said, that you're just like, how did you not mention this? But also, I hope that this episode was helpful. I hope maybe kind of putting yourself in the shoes of how our world is different today could maybe help you realize some of the things that maybe our church is missing today, or that some of the things that we need to embrace and do more of. Because I think that sometimes we get so stuck. That's why I love doing Revived Thoughts, because sometimes we get so stuck in the way everything's being done right now. The noise and everything is happening in the world today is so important, and it is. But then I think sometimes when you kind of take that breather and look at history and see all the other things that have happened that have been really, really important too, it can help you better understand the current moment and what needs to be done right now. This is Troy and Joel, and this is Revived Thoughts.